name change. There we go. We're going through a name change. And so we are actually the Apex Accelerators now. The one thing that's not changed, I still work for the University of Missouri Extension, as you can see by my shirt. So I am kind of open to taking questions as we go through this. I am not going to be personally monitoring the chat. I always find that to be kind of difficult to do when I'm doing a presentation, try to read the chat at the same time too. And I easily get distracted. You can ask people that know me pretty well. So I don't want to easily get distracted. But Tiffany, if you've got a question that pops up that's something of an urgent nature at that point, go ahead and feel free to interrupt me and I will stop. We'll try to answer the question. So I'm going to share my screen. Get going here and start the slideshow. And is everybody seeing the screen okay? I'm assuming. I did this one time and I was like about 10, 15 minutes into it. And finally somebody had the guts to speak up from the audience and said, oh, by the way, we're not sharing your screen. Felt so stupid. It's like, please let me know that stuff beforehand. So once again, thank you so much to Tiffany and the New Growth Women's Business Center. I am really honored to be able to do this. We're actually looking at kind of doing a series of presentations. We're going to be doing one coming up, I believe, in early August 3rd or 4th, if I remember correct, Tiffany, on not just woman-owned business certifications, but pretty much all the different certifications that you'd be eligible for. So this is a little bit more of a deeper dive into the WOSB, WBE, and as compared to probably what we'll do in a few weeks, where we'll be talking about HubZone, minority-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. So that may be something you might have an interest in hearing about too. So Missouri Apex, who we are, like I said, we are formerly the Missouri PTAC, or Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. We are funded by a cooperative grant from the Department of Defense. So, and that grant is actually held by Mizzou. So that's the reason why I am part of the University of Missouri Extension's Business Development Program. The important thing to keep in mind, because we are taxpayer funded, is our services are at zero cost, no cost, free. I always hate to use a free title, but we are free, which is a very important distinction, because there are a lot of companies out there that will charge what I'd call really big amounts of money for not a whole lot of service. For example, there's this thing called the System for Award Management, which we're going to touch on kind of off and on throughout the day. But if you wanted to do business with the federal government, or if you want to get certified with the federal government, you've actually got to go through and get registered to SAM. But there are a lot of companies out there that will charge over $600 to do a SAM registration for you. And realistically, I probably have done over 1,800 of those. Like I say, it will take us maybe, well, I mean, SAM used to be a little bit simpler, but will take us probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to go through the SAM registration together, and we should be able to get you assigned a cage code. However, though, by our grant agreement, we are somewhat limited on what we can actually assist businesses with. We can help them out with government contracting. So actually selling to the federal, state, and local governments, or what's called an SBIR or an STTR grant. And the SBIR is a Small Business Innovation Research Grant. And the STTR has to do with basically the technology transfer of those grants. And the STTR is going to normally be with the university. I don't personally work a whole lot with SBIR or STTR. I'm very, very fortunate. I work at the Missouri State University office of the Small Business Development Center. And we have an expert, Sandra Smart, in SBIR. So if ever have anybody mention to me SBIR, I will usually make that referral to Sandra. And that way I stay a little bit more focused on the government contracting. And we are pretty much can help in any area of government contracting. I mean, if I put down the entire list, you'd have an entire slide. But registration, so I'd mentioned SAM, we can help with the SAM registration. If you want to do business with MODOT, we can kind of help you get you registered with that. We can help you out with what's called Missouri Buys. Any of the socioeconomic certifications, so some of the ones we're talking about today. We have a bid match service. So if you're looking for potential opportunities in order to bid on projects, we've got a bid match service that we can set up based on keywords and based upon geographic locations, and help you find solicitations to bid on. And those aren't just federal solicitations, but those are a lot of state and local solicitations too. And, you know, I find myself at times going through a solicitation with somebody and saying, okay, I think you should bid on it. I don't think you should bid on it. The only thing that we are technically not supposed to help with when it comes to government contracting is what's called a bid protest. Those are fairly rare, but because we are funded by the federal government, they do not want us giving a whole lot of opportunities to people to say, hey, we think the federal government's wrong, you need to go after them. So that's the one thing I really can't help you on. I can do the kind of the wink wink though and say, you know, I think you may have a case here. But I cannot actually get too involved in helping you out with a bid protest. So Areas wise, so we are split up. We've got counselors that cover the entire state, so all 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis. This is the latest map that I could find for our service area. The kind of the pink colors that are up there are covered by the Kansas City regions and the counselors we have there. The grayer colors right in here, that's covered by the Columbia office. Obviously, the St. Louis region's over there in the green. We have a counselor down in West Plains that is now our longest term counselor, and he is covers pretty much southeast Missouri. And then you can see the territory that I cover, southwest Missouri. And I've also kind of tried to draw, and I was kind of teasing Tiffany about this. I never really did great in kindergarten with like drawing. And so that's kind of my attempt at trying to say this is the area that the New Growth Women's Business Center covers. The Kansas PTAC area there, and the one thing I probably should have put in the slideshow, which I did not, I will get that corrected. But if you are located in Kansas, if you can reach out to me at the end, I can hook you up with the counselors that are in Kansas and help you get discussions going with them if you're looking for help from a Apex or a PTAC. So today we're going to talk about 5 different certifications in a little bit of detail. So the first 2 kind of go hand in hand. It's a woman-owned small business and the economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. Those are actually both awarded by the Small Business Administration. We also have what's called the WBE, and you may have heard of MBE. So WBE is Women Business Enterprise, MBE is Minority Business Enterprise. Those are both actually given, at least in the state of Missouri, by the Office of Equal Opportunity. And then I believe it's, I'm trying to remember who does that from Kansas. I think it's Department of Economic Development, maybe in Kansas. We're going to talk about the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, which basically means you're trying to work with MODOT or one of the airports, and then what's called the ACDBE, which is the Airport Concessionaire DBE. And you get those approvals through either KCI or Lambert Airport in St. Louis. I do know that the Springfield Airport is showing some interest in possibly becoming an awardee of those 2. I don't know where they're at in the process. May have just been a casual conversation I had with somebody there, but I know that they're kind of looking at maybe being able to approve the ACDBE also. So let's talk first about the WOSB, and keeping in mind this is also the EDWOSB. But the eligibility requirements to become a woman-owned small business are as follows. Number 1, you've got to be a U.S. citizen. That can be a naturalized citizen, but you've actually got to be a U.S. citizen when you apply. It's got to have what they call direct ownership by the woman business owners. And I've got an entire slide coming up, about 2 slides on what I mean by unconditionally controlled. It's got to be a for-profit business. So if you're a nonprofit business, since this is awarded by the SBA just pays attention to for-profit businesses, you're not eligible to become a WOSB. You've got to be sure, and this is fairly rare, but your firm's not been debarred or suspended from doing business with the federal government. You've got to do some pretty naughty things in order to get debarred or suspended. And then your place of business must be located in the United States, and kind of the oddball thing, or you have to make a significant contribution to the U.S. economy. Being in the state of Missouri and being pretty much right in the dead center of the country, I don't think that's ever going to be something I'm going to have to worry about. But also, though, with us being PTAC, or Apex, we can only really just help out businesses that are located in the United States. And then you've also got to be a small business that's defined by the company's NAICS codes. And NAICS stands for North American Industry Classification Code. And there are probably roughly 1,000 NAICS codes that are out there to describe just about any type of business that you can be. A lot of the businesses I work with will have 3 or 4 or 5 different NAICS codes. But they're also got down must consider affiliated businesses. That's kind of comes into play when you have a woman business owner that owns multiple businesses and has multiple financial interests going around. So the EDWOSB, or the Economically Disadvantaged Woman-Owned Small Business, you've got to take all those requirements that I just covered from the previous slide, but then you've also got to take into the consideration the financial net worth of the women business owners. So for example, the net worth of the woman business owner, and this does not count the equity she has in her business, the equity she has in her home, or the unaccessible retirement account, has got to be $850,000 or less. Secondly, is that the woman business owner has got to have an adjusted gross income over the last 3 years that averages less than $400,000. And then the fair market value of all the assets that the individual owner has would be $6.5 million, not counting the untouchable amount of a retirement account. So majority of the folks that I deal with, once in a great while, I will have somebody sitting in my office. We'll talk about the EDWOSB, and the woman business owner will say, yeah, I don't meet those criteria. And the first thing that crosses my mind, it's good to be you. But realistically, most of the people most small business owners that I know do not come anywhere near any of those financial eligibilities. So I've noticed the chat box is getting a little bit active. Has you got anything we need to stop and talk about real fast, or?
Nope, not in regards to this. No questions.
Okay.
That.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and the one other thing too, I mean, this usually comes up as a question. These slides will be eligible, or will be available to you all today. I'll put them in a PDF format, and that way you can have these slides. These links were active as of yesterday. So with the PDF file, you might be able to click on these links and go directly to the links that I have referenced on the slides. So a couple slides back, I'd mentioned and talked about a little bit of control of the business. The key things when I'm looking at control, and the SBA is looking at control, are as follows. Number one is the woman business owners have to have the highest officer position in the firm. So in other words, they need to be the CEO, they need to be the president, they need to be the managing member. Cannot be like operations manager, because you're probably going to have somebody with a title a little bit higher than that. But the woman business owner who they're putting down for the 51% owner plus would have to actually have that highest officer position by title. Second off is that the person, the woman business owner, has got to control both the day-to-day and long-term business decisions. Ultimately, what the woman owner decides on the business is the direction the business is going to take, without anybody else being able to say, no, I don't think we need to go to that direction. Additionally, you got to have the managerial experience necessary to manage the firm. So if you've got a fairly high-tech firm that's going to require quite a bit of managerial experience, they will be looking at a resume, and they will be making sure, for example, that the woman business owner perhaps has the proper degree to run it. We'll look at what their past experience has been. They just want to make sure that whoever the woman business owner is claiming to be able to manage the firm can actually manage the firm. If it's a licensed organization, when I say licensed organization, I'm talking about one that's got to actually have a state of Missouri business license, an architectural CPA firm, a physician. Then the woman business owner must also hold that license. There are limitations on employment outside of the business. So, for example, and this came straight from the law, but must manage it on a full-time basis, devote full-time to the business concern during the normal working hours of business concerns in the same or similar lines of business. Does that mean that if you've got a fairly new firm that you cannot apply to become a WOSB because you're also working on an outside job? I usually like to tell people no, because the explanation that can be written is that you are devoting full-time attention to the business for what that business actually needs at this point. But you've got to be able, if the business starts getting really, really, really busy, then you've got to be committed to that business to say, it's time for me to step down from my full-time job and start managing this business full-time, because that's probably what the business is going to need at that point. Now, there obviously can be male owners, so a lot of husbands and wives that I work with, but that male owner cannot actually exercise actual control over the firm. So in other words, if I'm looking at an operating agreement, I'm looking at bylaws. Typically what I'm reading those for is, being that I'm not an attorney, is I'm not looking for all the legal ins and outs, but what I want to make sure is that, for example, there's not anything that can require unanimous vote. So if the woman business owner owns 60% of the business and she has two male partners who own 20% apiece, so she's 60-40 woman owned business to male owned business. As long as her 60% counts more than the 40% of the male business owners on any type of vote, and there's never something that says everybody has to agree on this, then you can prove that they exercise actual control over the firm. And normally, and this is actually not mentioned in the hyperlink below, but normally you really can't be a franchise business either. So why don't we say that you are I don't know, you own a Taco Bell, for example. Obviously it's a franchise business and you want to get this Taco Bell to be a woman-owned small business. I'm going to say you're probably going to be wasting your time trying to go through the registration process, because the franchisee, Taco Bell Incorporated, is going to have lots of control over your business as far as what you can and cannot do. So I'm not saying it can never be. I think a lot of it comes down to what the franchise business agreement looks like, but it's really worth if you're a franchise business, at least we can have a conversation. But without spending time looking at the franchise documents, I would not even think it'd probably be worth pursuing becoming a woman-owned small business. So next slide. So the woman-owned small business for at the federal level is a little bit unusual in that it's called the NAICS code driven. As you may recall, NAICS code stands for North American Industry Classification System. Purpose behind this is the federal government has named certain NAICS codes as being businesses that are probably underrepresented by women-owned businesses. So looking down through here, you've got the technical CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, but of the NAICS codes that are out there, there are 646 NAICS codes that have been set aside for woman-owned small businesses and 113 that have been set aside for economically disadvantaged woman-owned small businesses. Now, keep in mind that it's kind of that cause and effect. All EDWOSBs are WOSBs, but not all WOSBs are EDWOSBs because it's based upon the income levels of the woman owner. So example of the NAICS codes, and I just kind of randomly went through here and just grabbed some, and some of these I just thought were kind of interesting. So example, you could be a woman-owned small business and own a hog and pig farm. However, though, you cannot be a woman-owned small business. You have to be an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business for the chicken egg production, which is 112.310. You can be a woman-owned small business for what I would call the larger construction projects, like the commercial and institutional building construction. So if you're looking at a dormitory that's going to be built at Fort Leonard Wood, you're looking at a large construction project, maybe a new Army Corps of Engineers building. That's going to normally fall into that 236-220. However, though, if you are a drywall or insulation contractor, then you have to be an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. But kind of going on down, I mean, you'll see that a little bit further down, you got 485-210, which is interurban and rural bus transportation. However, though, if you are a charter bus industry, then you've got to be an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. And I'm not 100% sure if I understand a whole lot of the difference between those two. Maybe one's across the country and the other one's kind of point to point nearby. If you're going to be a lawyer, you can be a woman-owned small business, but if you're going to be a janitorial service, you got to be an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. So I've got the link at the bottom of the page that shows each one of these things listed out by NAICS code. Now, the other thing too, over in the yellow box here, I've got kind of a little thing written down about before registering SAM or the SB application process. I recommend reviewing the NAICS codes. Reason why I make that statement is that there may be a NAICS code. Your primary NAICS code may not be one that's eligible for woman-owned small business or economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. If that is the case, we can get you registered in SAM, but I am probably going to make the recommendation, at least at this point, that we may not want to go the extra step and get you certified as a woman-owned small business. But that would be an individual conversation that we can have during the SAM registration. So the application process. Number one, you got to have that active registration in the system for ward management. And once again, that is, if I look at the amount of work that I do for the Missouri Apex, I'm going to say probably at least 50% to 60% of what I do is helping people with the SAM registration. You've got to establish an account through what's called certified.sba.w or wosb.certified.sba.gov. And then you've got to claim the business. You claim your business by putting down what's called your unique entity identifier, which is something you get assigned during the SAM registration, by putting down your taxpayer ID that you put down in your SAM registration. And then the final piece of the puzzle, which seems to be the broken piece at this point, is what they call the SAM bank account. So when you register in SAM, you've got to put down that government likes to pay electronically. So part of the process, you've got to put down your routing number and your account number in the system for ward management. So in order for you to claim your business SID, you've actually got to put down the bank account number of the bank account that's in the SAM registration. Unfortunately, earlier this week, I was working with a company that is working on becoming a WOSB, and that SAM bank account number was broken. We were able to narrow it down because we had the unique entity identifier correct. We had the taxpayer ID number correct. But we had tried 2 different accounts for the SAM bank account and neither one worked, and we actually confirmed it in SAM. And so sometimes the system does not work properly, but we can kind of help hold the hands and get you through that. So it's a multi-part question registration with many, many questions. And about the second section that you get in there is you get what I call the decision point about, do you want to try to apply to become a WOSB or an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business? I like to have a discussion anytime we get to this decision point, because once you've made that decision, you've kind of hit what I'd call the point of no return. And I'm a classic rock fan, so I had to put a cover Kansas album, Point of No Return, on there. But once you've chosen to go one direction or the other without withdrawing your application, You cannot change your mind. So there are, like any other registration that you apply for, there are many, many different documents you're going to have to upload. And the WOSB application is not quite as heavy as per se as even what the state of Missouri requests, but they want, number one, that you're proof of being a U.S. citizen and a woman. So unexpired passport, birth certificate. If you are married and you no longer use your maiden name, well, they'd also have a marriage license in there showing where you've had the name change. They're going to be looking for what they call the articles and certificate of formation. So if you're an LLC or you're a C Corp or an S Corp in the state of Missouri, you have filed with the state Missouri Secretary of State's office, and that is actually on the website, and I can actually find that information on any company I'm dealing with. If you're an LLC, they're going to want what's called your operating agreement, and we'll talk about that here a little bit more in a second. If you're a corporation, they're looking for your bylaws, your meeting minutes, copies of your stock certificates, and your stock ledgers, and they're also, even on the stock certificates, looking for canceled stock certificates. A lot of times when I'm talking to newer business owners and I ask if they have an operating agreement, I kind of get a blank stare from them. I see your hand up. I kind of get a blank stare. It is the operating agreement defines how the company is owned and who actually controls the company. And it can be, I've seen them anywhere from 2 pages all the way up to about 20 pages for operating agreement. So Tiffany, what you got?
There's a question. So if they are a service disabled veteran, which one would be the recommended certificate?
Are they? So I'm going to say both. And the reason why I say both is that federal government will do what's called set aside. So in other words, the government can say, for this solicitation, we're only going to award this to a woman-owned small business. We're only going to award it to a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. And with the service-disabled veteran-owned small business, that's a huge, and I mean absolutely huge, advantage with the VA. But the nice thing is that when the government awards a contract, if you have a woman business owner that's both the WOSB and an SDVOSB, the government can actually mark 2 boxes and say, hey, we made an award to both the WOSB and SDVOSB, so we can help meet our goals a little bit better. So I'm going to say, if you can do both, let's do both.
So, so you don't have to pick one or the other, because you talk like you had to pick one, the WOSB or the EDWOSB. So.
Oh, okay. So the ED, yeah, you do have to, there is a decision you have to make if you're going to apply for the economically disadvantaged. But you know, I've got businesses that I work with that are literally 4 different. I mean, I've got one that's a hub zone service disabled vet, woman-owned small business. I guess she's not minority. So she's 3 of the 4 different what I call special certifications. And whenever the government deals with her, they get to mark all 3 boxes. So yeah, the only decision you got to make is between the WOSB and the EDWOSB.
So you can never be certified in both at one time. You have to choose.
Technically, if you're
you have other certifications you can get as well.
Yes. Technically, keep in mind that you're certified as an EDWOSB, you're also a WSB. But a WSB does not qualify as an EDWSB. So it's kind of a one-way street. You can EDWSB to WSB, but WSB does not qualify as an EDWSB. So got too many acronyms. Mentioned earlier about being able to prove that you can actually run the business. So that's where they're looking for a resume. If you've got multiple owners in the business, they may have to answer questions. It kind of depends on if you're going for the EDWSB. It kind of depends if you have other women business owners in there. But that's something, once again, that the PTAC or the Apex can help you through. And then if you're applying for the EDWSB, I mean, they're not only looking for the resumes and the operating agreements, but they're also looking for quite a bit of financial information, tax returns, W-2s, just so you can prove that you do not exceed those financial thresholds that we mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, this registration is currently taking anywhere from 3 to 4 months to get certified. Technically, you will normally get an email after you submitted the application. You'll normally get an email sometime within the next month saying, hey, you're being assigned to a reviewer. But then the reviewer will, and I've seen this happen more than once, the reviewer will actually then send out additional questions. And unfortunately, if you do not pick up or see that reviewer's emails to you and you miss those, then you go back to basically square one, have to go back through the application again. So I'm always telling people, do not ignore the emails. However, though, the SBA will work with you. I mean, the best example I've got is I work with a company down in Joplin that does some road work, who became a WOSB. She had gotten the additional information email about 3.5 or 4 months after we submitted the application. Her mother was in very, very, very serious shape at a Joplin hospital, and she was in no mood, no ability at that point to be able to answer questions from the SBA. I was able to reach out to the SBA, and they granted her like additional 2 or 3 weeks. But you know, if we'd have waited till after the deadline, I think we'd have been in trouble. But they were willing to work with us, but you just got to communicate with them. There are an opportunity through the WOSB, through the SBA, where you can actually go with what they've got 4 different approved third-party certifiers: the El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the National Women Business Owners Corporation, the U.S. Women Business Chamber of Commerce, and the Women Business Enterprise National Council. A lot of people call that WBENC. They will do a lot of the work. I mean, you still have to submit to them all the paperwork that you're planning that you would have to submit to the SBA. But they will actually, for a cost of anywhere above $350, help get you through the application process. Each of these companies or corporations, councils are all good. They all do an excellent job. Many of them will come to present at my national conference, and they do a great job doing the certification. But I also like to remind people that this is not the most difficult certification to go through. And if you really have an interest in doing this but don't want to pay the money, then once again, the Apex or the PTAC can hold your hand, or you should might be able to go through it yourself too. So do not feel like you have to pay. I guess the one advantage this might be is it could potentially speed the process up a little bit, because once you have gone through the certification from one of these companies, then going through the application with the SBA is much simpler, because all you have to do at that point is usually just kind of upload the document you got from one of those corporations or one of the third-party certifiers. So what are the benefits for an SBA WSB or an EDWSB? Well, you do have the potential for what they call sole source contracts. If there is only one woman-owned small business across the country that can provide a product or service, the federal government can award that person up to $7 million in manufacturing, $4 million in some, like a construction project, as long as it's a fair and reasonable price. And I mean, the contracting officers kind of know what's a fair and reasonable price. It's kind of rare if you think about the millions of contracts that are issued a year from the federal government, because only 385 contracts were issued last year as a sole source, but some of those were rather big contracts. You also have the potential for set-asides, and I mentioned the set-asides a little while ago about how the federal government can say we're only going to buy this from woman-owned small business. Keep in mind that there is a goal of 5% a year that's being bought by woman-owned small businesses. The federal government has historically not hit that goal, so they have a lot of interest in working with woman-owned businesses. They also have not hit a goal what's called Hub Zone, and we're going to talk about that in the next presentation in August. Great for subcontracting opportunities, because, for example, there are a lot of large prime contractors out there that have to work, that have been awarded prime contractors. One of the things they have to do is meet certain subcontracting goals. I am only going to use their name because I feel like I got permission to use their name, but Eagle Pitcher down in Joplin, who does the high-tech batteries for NASA and the Department of Defense, is a large prime contractor. And they are always doing their best to meet woman-owned companies and Hub Zone companies and minority-owned companies and service disabled veteran-owned companies that offer a product or service that they may need to help them meet their subcontracting goals. And you also see that in federal fiscal year 2022, there were 2,209 set-aside contracts awarded for woman-owned small businesses. So now kind of jumping off the federal bandwagon, talk a little bit more about the state bandwagon. So through the state of Missouri, they have offered through the Office of Equal Opportunity, the WBE, the Woman Business Enterprise. And I'd mentioned when we went through the original slide that that's also the same group that does Minority Business Enterprise. So if I have a woman business owner that is Native American, African American, Hispanic, Asian, or subcontinent Asian, kind of meaning Pakistani, country India, Filipino, then they also would be eligible to apply for the MBE. The the applications through the Office of Equal Opportunity, and here's the Department of Commerce and Department of Transportation for Kansas does the WB for the state of Kansas. Unlike the federal government, though, from what we talked about the last slide, there are no set-asides for the state government. In other words, the state government never puts out a procurement and says we're only going to buy this from a woman-owned business. But what they do put out is typically will give bonus points to woman-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, or service-disabled veteran enterprise businesses. So I'm assuming we must have a service-disabled vet on the call. Thank you for your service, but there's also an SDBE, which we'll talk about on the next call also. So the woman business enterprise, state of Missouri. The process to do this is a fairly detailed application. I typically will plan on having at a minimum of 2 different meetings with the company when we start going through the application. The application itself is not overly scary, probably about 10 or 11 different pages. There are some information that we've got to provide that typically at the first meeting we will not have, so we will leave blanks in the application. Site visit perhaps up until before COVID. Anytime that there was a woman business enterprise or minority business enterprise, the state of Missouri was going to would do a site visit. So they would show up in Springfield about once every 6 weeks and cover all the companies in Springfield. But now they're doing a lot of those by actually phone calls. Even though I believe they're beginning to start getting back into the site visits now, even though I'm not sure they've been down to Springfield for a while. Takes about 1 to 2 months for the determination. They're actually fairly quick when you talk about the way things normally move with the government. A lot more documentation is required for the WOSB, and if a company is less than 1 year old, then they will also need a business plan. Now, the business plan that they need is not near as detailed as a business plan that would be put together to get an SBA loan, but they would like to know kind of how if company sees them increasing sales. Like I say, it's not some 20-page document. I've seen some of the business plans that would be 2 or 3 pages, which seems to suffice for the state of Missouri. Sometimes, though, if you're still less than 1 year old, I sometimes have to question, does it really make sense at this point to go after a WB or not? Documents, this is not an all-inclusive listing, and it's somewhat depending upon if you're a sole proprietorship versus LLC versus a S Corp or C Corp. But they need your driver's license, they'll need a birth certificate, they're going to need tax returns. And with the tax returns, they're basically kind of wanting to see how the income levels for the business are doing. They're going to be looking at your operating agreements or your bylaws. Once again, the same thing that the federal government's looking for is that the woman business owners actually control the business. They're looking for the certificate of formation or articles of incorporation. They're looking for some initial investment proof. And this is sometimes one of the more difficult things for a company to prove. So if I am talking to a fairly new company that's looking at put together an operating agreement, one of the things I will recommend is that they put down their initial investment information in their operating agreement and show how they originally set up the bank account or what assets and stuff they brought into the business to start the business. They want to see a bank signature card. They want to see the bank signature card because they want to make sure that the woman business owner can actually sign the checks. They're going to be looking for lease agreements, and I would always prefer these lease agreements to be signed by the woman business owner. They're going to be looking for any loan documents. They're going to be looking for payroll information. Once again, just like the WOSB, they want to make sure that the woman business owner is the highest paid person in the firm. They're going to be looking for an organizational chart, and I will tell you right now, they will be looking for the name of that woman business owner at the top of that organizational chart. And I've helped put together a lot of org charts because typically we're talking about a company with less than 5 employees. They're going to be looking for business insurance. I have yet to kind of figure out what they're using that document for because it doesn't really prove ownership. But I guess if it's like malpractice insurance or something, I want to make sure that the woman business owner is actually covered by malpractice insurance. They're going to be looking for proof of vehicle ownership, so titles. If your company happen to have cars or vans or trucks, they're going to be looking for titles. And there's also a signed affidavit that has got to be notarized that they're going to be looking for. And those all got to be uploaded to the state site. Disadvantaged business enterprise, DBE. So we talked about the WOSB. We've talked about the WBE. In Missouri, you can get what's called a disadvantaged business enterprise. And at this point, to my knowledge, there are four different organizations you get this from. You get it through MODOT, so the Missouri Department of Transportation is who I typically works with the most. You can get it through the Kansas City International Airport. You get through Lambert International Airport in St. Louis, and then the Bi-State Development, which is out of the St. Louis area. Requirements to be a DBE, like anything else, it's got to be owned by a U.S. citizen. It's got to be a small business. It's got to be for profit. And it's got to be at least 51% unconditionally owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individual. So well, the first conversation I will have with somebody that's looking at this is we'll talk about the social disadvantage. So you've got to either be a minority, you've got to be unlike the MBE, you could be a woman and could be considered to be socially disadvantaged, or if you are a white male such as myself, if I had a large disability, I might be able to apply to become socially disadvantaged. If I had, like I said, if I were quadriplegic or something, I might be able to make that argument that I'm a disadvantaged individual, socially disadvantaged individual. And then they also have what they call their economic net worth. Their net worth numbers are much, much, much lower than the net worth of in the WOSB. It's $1.32 million. That does, making this statement, that does include the retirement, the touchable amount of the retirement. I believe it also includes, I'd have to look at this. I have not worked with the DBE quite as much as some of the other ones I've worked with, but I also believe that includes the value you have in your business. So being proven economic disadvantaged for the DBE is much more difficult than it is for the WOSB. So the DBE application process is actually two separate applications. You've got to fill out the actual, what I'd call the normal application. It sometimes will go through an online portal through either the KCI. I've not ever looked at the one for by state development, but for KCI or for Lambert, they are both an online portal. You have to fill the information out. For the state of Missouri, for the MODOT, there's actually an upload that you can do through their website. I've got all the information below that. app.box.com is the upload area for MODOT. I just deal with MODOT so much more, so that's the information I put on here. If you're just looking to become a DBE, I'm going to recommend we work with MODOT, because I always feel like when I'm working with the Kansas City Airport or the St. Louis Airport, they're giving a little bit, maybe some special privileges perhaps to the folks that are actually located in Kansas City. The business information documents you're going to provide are almost exactly like they are for the WBE application. So if you've got an interest, you've got a product perhaps that the state of Missouri would buy or one of the airports would buy, if we're going through the WBE process, we probably would not hurt to just go ahead and take those same documents and upload them for the DBE application. But then they also have the personal net worth statement, which is very, very detailed. It's probably a 5 or 6 page document that goes into your amount of money that you have, perhaps or if you've got rental properties, goes into the amount of assets you have in banks. It wants to know about your stocks that you own. It wants to know about the bonds that you own. It wants to know about the furniture you have in your house. It wants to know about the cars that you own. Very intrusive as far as in fact, when I'm dealing with somebody with the DBE and we are looking over their personal net worth statement, number one, I prefer not to look at those. But number two, if we are going through those things, I mean, obviously working with PTAC or Apex, we were sworn to secrecy. But I will usually not even keep a copy of that in my files, because I just don't want that information. I really don't want to know much about it. So is it really worth it? So this is back. So this is a couple of years back, obviously, but at this point, on a monthly basis, MODOT puts out basically a letting list for construction projects that they're going to let out, and they're always pushing their prime contractors to work with DBEs. So in this case, you will see that there was a road project in Polk County, I guess falls within the territory for the Women's Growth Center there. It was a $1.19 million project on Highway H, wherever that's at, some various other things. It was awarded to this Hunter Chase and Associates, but Hunter Chase actually came up with I guess Hunter Chase is working there as a DBE, but 7% of that was awarded through 2 various DBEs. You look above that and you're going to see, for example, with the construction project on Highway 340 in St. Louis, there were actually 4 different DBEs that came up to 16%. So that ends up being real money. In fact, at the very bottom is like 1 point. I just screwed this up. I'm sorry. There. Roughly, it's hidden behind my pictures, no wonder. So roughly about $3.5 million was awarded to companies that were DBE certified through a prime contractor. ACDBE application, ACDBE, you may recall, AC stands for Airport Concessionaire Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. It's the best way to describe it is if you're a coffee shop and you're wanting to put in your coffee shop at the Springfield Regional Airport or Springfield National Airport, beg your pardon. If you have a product perhaps that you can repair cars and you would like to get a contract with Avis Rentals or Enterprise Rentals, if you can get certified as an ACDBE, because what you're doing is you're working directly with companies that are directly with the airport, it may not hurt you through the application process. Now, the tricky part, and I just found this out today, dealing with a company that's trying to get they've got a kind of a book type product they're trying to sell to like Hudson News. You may actually have to have a business license, for example, in Kansas City. We're getting ready to make that argument that we really should have to have a business license, but you can get this certification through Kansas City Airport and through the Lambert Airport. The nice thing is, I mean, a little bit different size standards for what's considered to be a small business. You're a small business if you've done less than $56.42 million a year over the last 3 years. You got, for your bank, you got less than $1 billion in assets. So if you're, why don't we say, a banker, and you've got a bank that's worth 500 million in assets, you could potentially get certified as an ACDBE. Rental car companies, pay telephone companies that kind of crack me up, and they how many pay telephones you see at the airport anymore, or car dealerships. If you're a car dealership and you're trying to sell cars, perhaps like Enterprise Rental Car, if you got less than 350 employees, you are socially and economically disadvantaged, then you could actually fill out, become an ACDBE. That is a lot of territory that I've covered. And I always feel like I'm shooting people with a water hose with all the stuff that I'm putting out there for somebody to learn. So we're kind of at that point now where I may go ahead and open up the chat and kind of look through it. But probably the next important thing, though, is let me go ahead and put this slide up too, because this is probably the best way to get hold of me if you've got questions, is this waldoaj@missouri.edu. So, or my office phone number. Now, post-COVID, I work in the office 2 to 3 days a week, and I'm home the other couple of days a week. I'm working at an alternate location a couple other days a week. So I usually recommend to people the best way to get in touch with me is through email. So with that being said, I hope that I have not bored the heck out of anybody. I'm going to open up the
So
chat.
is there a place that you can look to see what contracts are available once you get this certification, or do you have that like after you go through that process? Like, how do people find out? Is it like what's out there for their businesses?
Okay, so a couple different ways. One of them is you can go to, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And I'm going to try to end this. So I'm going to go to sam.gov. I'm going to share my screen again. So, for example, sam.gov is a site that you get registered to do business with the federal government. It's also the site that you also the site where you can find different things to bid on. So I had a client earlier this week and he reached out to me about this, what they call MS Enterprise. This basically has to do with security systems of different VA hospitals, facilities across the nation, Atlanta, and I don't remember where all. But if we were to come in here, we're going to just search. And I wanted to look up exactly what was currently being bid on that was set aside for a WOSB. I can come down here and I can put down contract opportunities. And I'm going to put down set aside as being either a EDWOSB or a WOSB. Here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and just say, okay, so currently they say there's 581 things on. Some of these things are past. This is one problem with SAM, is that you may have things on here that are 3 years old, but remote medical coding services. So if I got a coder, that's a WOSB. This is called what's called original pre-solicitation, kind of warning people this is coming out. A marine window, so I'm assuming that's probably for a boat of some type. Some sort of jack. All these things that have these tins in front of them are all bought through what's called the Defense Logistics Agency. But then fire alarm repair, so wherever this may happen to be at, Department of Army, roof repair. So I'm actually going to go a little bit further. I'm going to say, let's try to find this thing as being just in the state of Missouri. So place of performance. So we're going to look at Missouri, and this might narrow it down even more. I don't know if we'll have anything today or not, but we'll look. There we go. So right now, the only thing that is open in the state of Missouri is set aside for WOSB. Well, notice it actually expired now. Bids were July 7th, but was some type of a janitorial service at some Rivers Project location, which I assume would probably be up on the Mississippi River somewhere. It's actually through the Department of Defense, so it's probably through the Army Corps of Engineers. Set aside contract, West Alton, Missouri. So yeah, I believe that'd be the Mississippi River. Yeah, so that was somebody would have actually looks like it's at the lock and dam. So probably cleaning all the lock offices for the places on the Mississippi. So that's one way you can look. Another place you can look is, once again, keeping in mind that Missouri does not set aside anything for women-owned businesses. Come to Missouri Buys, you hit the bid board, and let's just put in the word construction. And there we go. We've got, well, most of these have already passed bid, but they actually have listed out here 1,644 matching solicitations. Most of these are probably not open today. Maybe the ones in green are, I believe. Nope. And they've also got these upcoming MB, WB, and STV subcontracting opportunities. So never a good thing to like go through a presentation and not be on a site for a while and then try to like navigate the site, because we'll change the site on you. But if you've got a little more interest in this, let me know. I'd like to say, I don't want to have you all sit here watch me scratch my head right now. Say, okay, where do I go from here? So
Right. Just knowing though that they can have access to like, if they're talking about, oh, is it worth doing it? Is there kind of, how often do those contracts go up? I mean, like if we're advising them to the pros and cons, yes, there's a lot of money in it, but like Missouri, like, can you even go down to like the zip code and that kind of thing to see what
you could not, in the state of Missouri on bid match, or not on bid match, but on Missouri Buys, you could not get specific to, I mean, you might be put them in maybe in Springfield janitorial. But yeah, you cannot search by zip code in Missouri Buys.
Okay.
But but that's part of the advantage of our bid match system that we have in Missouri Apex, is that once again, we can only do it by the state of Missouri. We cannot get down to county specific. But if you're on that service, you'll get really good really quick and be able to scan and say, yeah, that one looks like it may be of interest to me. So yeah. What else?
Okay.
By the way, just so like you all know that it's Alan Walden, everyone. That's not actually me typing. That's actually my boss is typing that in. So everybody say hi, Jana.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. She answered that question. I was going to wait till the end, but she answered that. But I don't think there's any more. I think you gave us a lot of information.
Well, I got something for Rebecca here. Is it like applying for a job where everything should look nice, or just formatting these documents not really matter? So Rebecca, if you're talking about if you're talking about actually answering a bid, putting in a bid, looks do count, because for example, they may have you can only be 10 pages long. It's going to be in, I don't know, times Roman numeral font, no longer than 12, no more than 10 or 12 font. So yeah, it does really matter there, because if you've got 11 pages and all they're going to look at 10, they're going to quit reading when they get to page 10. So if that's what you're asking, I mean, if you want to, I assume you could probably pull yourself off of.
She had to leave. She must have had to go back to work.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah. But I think just making sure that all the documents are in place, and it always looks better whenever there's a little bit of format to it, but sometimes you can't do that when you're just submitting like legal statements and that kind of thing. Like all of that's all the same.
Very good.
I think it was more talking about the application, like does everything have to be super formatted, that type of thing.
These reviewers are pretty used to seeing some documents look better than others. So
right.
I usually look for readability. I mean, if we're sitting in, for example, a copy of the birth certificate and I can't read it, then they're not gonna be able to read it either. So, I think that's probably where the value of working with the Apex is that I do a lot of hand holding, but ultimately if somebody's putting together their own app, and if they want to put together their own application, great. But I usually say before you then submit it, want you and I to sit down and do the review, because I'd rather find the mistakes in it than have them find it.
Right, especially if it takes so long to get back. I mean,
Yeah.
then that just prolongs the process.
And that doesn't mean I'm going to find everything that's wrong with an application. But what that does tell me, though, is it will give me an opportunity to say, I think this is going to be an issue, and hopefully we can get those issues taken care of before they actually become issues.
Correct. Well, I appreciate your time and all of your knowledge, and we look forward to learning about HubZone and all the other certifications in 2 weeks. I think, yeah, 2 weeks, August 3rd, I do believe.
That is coming up quick. Okay.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Yeah. So we'll be seeing you again in 2 weeks, learning about others. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And again, I'm Tiffany Frost from New Growth Women's Business Center. You can reach out to us, go to our Facebook page. It's got all of our webinars on it. What's coming up, who's going to be presenting, and we look to see you then. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Thank y'all. See ya. Bye-bye. What do you think?